My husband is the definition of an ice king. Aloof, distant, and seemingly untouchable. We've been married for a year, yet there has been absolutely zero progress in the bedroom. But after a car accident, something strange started happening. One night, I was fast asleep when a sudden jolt shot through my body, like a soft electric current humming under my skin. I gasped, awake, heart racing. It didn't feel like something coming from me. Before I could make sense of it, the sensation faded. The bathroom door clicked open and Julian stepped out, steam drifting behind him from a hot shower. I instantly straightened in bed and pretended to be deeply absorbed in a book. He glanced at me, his expression as cool and unreadable as ever, then walked toward the closet. I stared at his broad back until he disappeared inside, then grabbed a pillow and punched it. Julian, you impossible man. Before I could spiral further, he came back out. I scrambled to lift my book again. Wow. Words. So many words. Julian was drying his hair with a towel. His gaze flicked to my book, and a faint smirk appeared. Good read. I gave him a polite smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Then, on purpose, I shifted slightly, letting the hem of my silk nightgown ride up and reveal my thigh. Is it? His eyes swept over my legs. They lingered for a fraction of a second. Then he looked away again. Frustration slammed into me like a brick wall. 1 year. An entire year. Who lives like this? I lowered the book and studied him openly. Broad shoulders, strong hands, sharp jaw, thick dark hair. Every physical sign pointed to a perfectly healthy man. A man who should in theory be very much alive in that department. Yet here we were. I checked my reflection in a small mirror. I looked good, really good. So, why did my husband treat me like background furniture? Refusing to give up, I crawled across the mattress, slipped my arms around his shoulders, and gently breathed near his ear. Hubby. He turned. My eyes were full of attention. His were clear, calm, and infuriatingly innocent. What's wrong? He asked. Are you cold? Yes, I nodded dramatically. Barry, I need you to warm me up. He raised an eyebrow, a faint teasing curve touching his lips. I thought so. Hope sparked. Then he walked to the closet and pulled out a thick set of flannel pajamas. Compared to what I was wearing, they looked like winter armor. He placed them in my arms and patted my head. Put these on. You won't be cold anymore. And just like that, he walked back to the bathroom. I stared at the pajamas in disbelief. Does he enjoy torturing me? Julian and I were the result of a perfect business arrangement. He had money. I had looks. Our families approved. Wedding at TFet. No one mentioned I was marrying an iceberg. My best friend Harper loved reminding me of this. You married a saint of Wall Street, she said once, swirling her wine. He doesn't do desire. Be grateful you're rich, Chloe. A saint. Married to a nun, I muttered. Perfect. Tragedy. Harper gave me a pitying look. You're in your prime and your husband treats intimacy like a corporate liability. I stabbed my steak a little harder than necessary. Back in college, men practically fought for my attention. Now my own husband wouldn't even blink. If it's that bad, Harper said, leaning closer. Why don't you divorce him? I hesitated. It's not that simple. Our families are tied together. Walking away isn't an option. So you're just going to live like this forever? I hissed. Lower your voice. Harper's eyes sparkled mischievously. If you can't leave him, at least go out and remind yourself you're alive. She told me about a private women-only club owned by her aunt, a place designed for relaxation, fantasy, and discretion. Think of it as therapy, she said. I didn't answer. That night Harper dragged me there anyway. The place was sleek, dimly lit, and filled with beautiful men of every type. And yet, none of them impressed me. After Julian, everyone else felt like a downgrade. Look what your husband did to your standards, Harper groaned. Then she spotted a newcomer. Tall, well-dressed, reserved new recruit. She whispered. Top student, quiet type. He had that same distant air. Too familiar. Harper abandoned me with a wink. We talked like conversation. Nothing serious. For a moment, I almost felt in control again. Then the door opened. Chloe. My blood turned to ice. Julian stood there, expression unreadable. The ride home was silent. Inside the car, he handed me a garment. Cake. Grandma expects us for dinner. Of course she does. I changed in the back seat. painfully aware of his eyes in the mirror, even though he never turned around. At the manor, rain poured down. Julian opened my door and pulled me into his arms to shield me from the storm. I told myself it was for appearances. My body didn't seem to care. At dinner, Grandma asked the inevitable question. When are you giving me a great grandchild? I nearly choked. Julian calmly squeezed my hand. No ruse, Grandma. We're focusing on work. He even placed food into my bowl, smiling like the perfect husband. We were both playing a part. Later that night, Grandma insisted we stay over because of the storm. Julian declined. Be good, he said quietly. Let's go home. The rain hammered the windshield as we drove. Harper texted nonstop. I barely read any of it. Then white light impact. Darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed. My parents were crying. They said Julian had taken the worst of it. He shielded me. I was mostly fine, just shaken. As the room settled into silence, a strange sensation brushed across my lips. Warm. Soft. I startled. A nurse walked past the door. Mr. Gu just woke up in the next room. My heart skipped. Something had changed. And I had a feeling. Whatever connected us now was only just beginning. I didn't know how right I was. Because the first night after we got home, I woke up with my body buzzing. Like someone had plugged me into a wall. Outlet. Not pain, not fear, something worse, something humiliating. A sudden rush of heat curled through me. Sharp and undeniable. Like my nerves had decided to riot without asking my permission. I shot upright, sheets twisted around my legs, staring into the dark like it had personally betrayed me. This wasn't me. I hadn't done anything. I hadn't even had a dream. And yet my pulse was racing like I'd run a mile. I pressed a hand to my stomach, tried to breathe through it, tried to reason with my own body like it was a misbehaving child. Stop. I whispered. Stop. Stop. The sensation only surged again, then faded like a switch had been flipped off. At the exact same time, a low sound drifted from the bathroom. Not loud, not obvious, but unmistakably satisfied. I froze. The bathroom door was cracked open, light spilling out in a thin blade across the floor. Julian was in there. And for the first time in a year, I had the insane thought that maybe my husband was not as untouched as he pretended to be. My cheeks burned, my brain short-circuited. Then the front gate beeped outside. Tires crunched the driveway gravel. Julian's car, he was back, which meant what? I'd been reacting to something happening when he wasn't even home. No. That was impossible. That was ridiculous. That was the kind of plot twist you'd find in a late-night romance novel Harper would giggle over and then swear was research. I swallowed hard, forced my face into neutral, and shoved every inappropriate thought into a locked box in my mind. When Julian walked in a minute later, loosening his tie, looking like he'd been carved out of expensive stone, I was sitting upright against the headboard with a hardback book open on my lap. Game theory. Because if you're going to lie with confidence. He glanced at me, unreadable as ever, and headed straight for the bathroom like I didn't exist. I watched him go like a woman watching a crime scene. The door shut. I grabbed my pillow and tried to murder it. Julian, you impossible man. I barely got the rage out of my system before he came back out. Damp hair towel around his neck, and that same infuriating calm. My hands flew back to the book. Oh yes. Look at me. So intellectual, so serene. Definitely not spiraling. His eyes flicked to the title. A faint, amused curve touched his mouth. This is a good one, he said. I smiled politely. Then, because I am not above war, I shifted again, letting the hem of my nightgown inch higher. Is it? I asked sweetly. His gaze dropped. It paused one heartbeat. Then he looked away again. The defeat hit like a brick. 1 year. An entire year. Who marries a man who looks like that and ends up sleeping like their coworkers assigned to the same hotel room? I stared at him openly now, taking inventory like I was building a case. Broad shoulders, strong hands, a throat that tightened when he swallowed. Everything about him screamed that he was healthy. So why did he act like intimacy was a banned substance? I checked myself in the mirror propped on the nightstand. I looked good. I looked very good. So why did my husband treat me like a decorative lamp? I crawled over, wrapped my arms around his shoulders, and leaned in close voice, dropping into my most sinful whisper. Hubby, he turned. My eyes were doing the most. His were clear, calm, and almost curious. What's wrong? He asked. Are you cold? Yes, I am. I nodded, dramatically. Bri, I need you to warm me up. His eyebrow lifted and for a second just one hope sparked. Then he walked into the closet and came back, holding a neatly folded set of silk pajamas, thick, modest, the opposite of everything I was wearing. He placed them in my arms and patted my head like I was a child who'd asked for candy before dinner. Put these on, he said. You won't be cold anymore. Then he turned and walked back toward the bathroom. I stared after him in disbelief. Does he enjoy torturing me? I didn't even realize I was still holding the pajamas until my phone buzzed. Harper? I picked up, whispering like I was hiding evidence. You alive? She asked. Barely. You went to Desire and got caught by your husband like you're starring in a soap opera. I need details. I groaned. Don't start. Oh, I will start. Harper said. I will start and I will not stop. I sank back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling like it might offer advice. I didn't even do anything, I muttered. Sure, Harper said. And I may. Noon. I lowered my voice further. He was. Come. What do you mean come? I mean he looked at me like I'd forgotten to file paperwork on time. I hissed. Then he handed me a garment bag and told me Grandma wanted dinner. Harper made a sound of pure fascination. That's not come. That's terrifying. I glanced at the bathroom door. Steam drifted out again, and that strange memory flashed. Heat in my body, the faint sound from the bathroom, my own pulse betraying me. I swallowed. Harper, something is wrong. Wrong how? I don't know. I admit it. Ever since the accident, my body keeps reacting like someone's flipping switches. There was a pause. Then, Harper's voice sharpened. Wait, reacting? When you're with him? Not exactly. Chloe, Harper said slowly. Are you telling me you're having phantom feelings? My face went hot. I'm telling you I'm going to throw my phone out the window. Harper burst into laughter. Oh my God. Oh my God. You're connected. I am not connected. Listen, she said, suddenly serious. The accident did something. You were both in that crash. You both. Don't say bonded. I snapped. I wasn't going to say bonded. She lied. But Chloe, this is either a medical mystery or the beginning of the messiest romance arc ever. I pinched the bridge of my nose. I hate you. No, you don't, Harper said. You love me. And you're welcome. The call ended and I was left staring at the closed bathroom door, heart thumping for reasons I didn't want to name. A few days later, Julian was still recovering. Quiet. Bruises, subtle stiffness, the kind of pain he tried to hide behind perfect posture and silence. My parents wouldn't stop praising him. He saved you. My mother kept saying. You have to take care of him, Chloe. As if I hadn't noticed. As if I hadn't been replaying the way he'd pulled me into his arms in the rain, shielding me like I mattered. And then there was the hospital. The way my lips had tingled. The way he touched his mouth like he felt something too. Like we both experienced the same strange echo. I tried to ignore it. I tried to be normal. And then Julian's childhood friend showed up. Her name was June. June Carter, polished, elegant. The kind of woman who looked like she'd never spilled coffee in her life. Walked into Julian's hospital room with a thermal bag of homemade soup and that effortless familiarity that made my stomach tighten. She barely glanced at me, just enough to measure me, to file me away. Julian, she said softly. You scared me. He looked up, expression I'm fine. June's smile didn't reach her eyes. You're not. I stood there holding a cup of water, suddenly aware that I was the wife in the room, and yet somehow felt like the intruder. When they started talking, quiet voices, shared history, I stepped back without thinking. No one stopped me. Outside, I leaned against the wall and tried to breathe through the jealousy clawing at my throat. So this was it. This was the reason. The reason Julian had married me and kept me at arm's length. Not because he didn't want me, because he wanted someone else. I went home that day and checked myself out of every fantasy I'd ever had about him. If I was just a placeholder wife in a business deal, then fine. Ide surviva. But I would not be humiliated. That night, back in our bedroom, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Julian worked in his office down the hall. June's face kept flashing behind my eyes. That composed pity when she looked at me, like I was temporary, like I didn't belong. I turned on my side, then the other, then back again. And then that familiar heat rose again, quick and sharp, like my skin was suddenly too small for my body. I clenched the sheets. Not now. Not this. I squeezed my thighs together, furious. At myself, furious at biology, furious at the universe. It didn't help. The sensation kept building, restless and demanding, like my nerves had decided they were done being polite. My eyes drifted to the bedside drawer, the one I hadn't opened in months. I stared at it like it was contraband. I told myself I was a grown woman. I was allowed to be human. Julian clearly wasn't interested, and I wasn't going to beg, so I reached for the drawer. The second my fingers touched the handle, the office door down the hall opened. Footsteps. Julian's. I went statue still. I snapped the drawer shut like it had burned me, sat upright, and grabbed my book. Game theory again, because apparently this was my entire personality now. Julian walked in wearing his calm-like armor. He looked at me. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. Then he went to the bathroom. I watched him disappear. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. A second later, my phone buzzed with Harper's name. I answered, whispering, "If you're calling to laugh at me, I swear." "I'm not laughing," Harper said, and she sounded far too entertained for that to be true. "I'm checking in. House married to a robot. Life." I stared at the closed bathroom door. "Harper, I think I'm the other woman in my own marriage." Harper went quiet. "Explain." I told her about June, about the way she looked at Julian, about the way Julian didn't push her away, about how the whole room shifted around their history. Harper made a thoughtful sound. "Okay, what do you mean, okay?" I hissed. "I mean, June is not what you think, Harper." I watched her walk in like she owned the place. "I know her," Harper said. "My aunt knows her. There's gossip. But I didn't want to tell you because it's not my story." My stomach dropped. "Tell me." Harper sighed. "June doesn't date men." I blinked. "What? She likes women?" Harper said flatly. "And she's been quietly in love with Julian's sister for years. So you're barking up the wrong tree, babe." My mouth fell open. I stared at the ceiling like it had personally betrayed me. "You're lying." "I am not lying." I sat there, stunned, heat flushing my face for a completely different reason. So I'd built a whole tragedy in my head for nothing. A fake rival, a fake heartbreak. I was going to combust from embarrassment. "I hate myself," I whispered. Harper laughed. "Good. That's appropriate." I hung up and stared at the bathroom door again, hearing the shower run, my heart pounding. If Julian wasn't holding out for June, then why? Why year of polite distance? Why a marriage that looked perfect in public and empty behind closed doors? Julian came out and slid into bed like nothing in the world was complicated. He reached for me carefully, like he was mindful of his bruises, and pulled me against his chest. I stiffened. The closeness was unfamiliar in a way that made my pulse spike. "Julian," I whispered, trying to sound annoyed instead of shaken. "You're injured. Stop moving like you're invincible." A low sound rumbled in his chest. Half laugh, half cease. "I'm not moving," he murmured. "Your arm is literally around me." He didn't answer. His breathing slowed, and then I realized he'd fallen asleep. Just like that, as if holding me was the most natural thing in the world, as if he'd always wanted. I laid there in the dark, pinned by his warmth, heart racing, trying not to move, because the second I did, the strange heat returned, faint at first, then stronger, as if my body was reacting to his closeness and something else I couldn't explain, something that felt like it wasn't entirely mine. I finally wriggled free, inch by inch, like a guilty worm escaping a trap, and rolled to the far edge of the bed. Julian didn't stop me. He only shifted, turning slightly away, giving me space. Without a word, I fell asleep. Eventually, but near dawn I woke up, with a gasp, sweat on my skin, my pulse in my throat, and the bathroom light on. A soft sound drifted out. Breath, a low murmur, the faintest edge of strain. I stared at the ceiling, frozen. I wasn't being tormented. Julian wasn't an iceberg. He was fighting something, and somehow it was reaching me. The next day I avoided him. Not because I was afraid of him. Julian was the least physically threatening man I'd ever met. I avoided him because every time I saw him, there was that stubborn, controlled restraint on his face that made my chest Ache. He looked like a man constantly choosing discipline over instinct, and that made me feel guilty. Harper, of course, thought this was hilarious. You're telling me you went to Desire, got caught, got home, and now your husband is doing late-night breathing exercises like he's training for the Olympics? She said over drinks. Stop, I muttered. Oh, I'm not stopping, she said. Chloe, do you realize how insane this sounds? You're basically in a romance novel with a supernatural twist. It's not supernatural. Then explain why you keep reacting. I didn't have an explanation, and apparently neither did Julian. A week later, Harper dragged me back to Desire because she had a talent for making bad decisions feel like self-care. The private room was velvet and dim lighting and expensive perfume. A man knelt to massage my calves, respectful and professional, eyes lowered. He called himself 86. Harper had insisted, he's new, quiet, pretty. You'll like him. I tried. I really did. But the entire time, all I could think was he isn't Julian. And the second I realized that I wanted to scream, I took a sip of my drink and leaned back, pretending I was relaxed. 86's hands were warm, skilled. My body should have responded. Instead, it only did that strange, delayed thing like an echo, as if my nerves were listening for someone else. Harper laughed at my expression. You're hopeless. Before I could retort, the room door opened. The temperature dropped. Julian stood there, eyes dark, face calm, and somehow even more dangerous for how quiet he was. Harper immediately stood up, putting herself between us like she was guarding me from a storm. Mr. Gu, she said smoothly. Chloe had a little too much to drink. I was taking her upstairs to rest. I'll take her home, Julian said. Harper tightened her hold on my shoulder. I'm not sure she wants to go. I lifted my head, drunk enough to be reckless, and pointed at Julian like he was the problem. I want 86, I slurred. Silence. Harper's eyes widened. Julian didn't blink. He simply stepped forward, scooped me up like I weighed nothing, and carried me out while Harper shouted words I couldn't make out. In the car, I clung to Julian's shirt and muttered nonsense like I was possessed. 86, I murmured. Where's my lace sleep mask? 86 pour me à drink. 86, Julian's jaw flexed once. He didn't say a word. When we got home, he sat me on the bed and walked into the bathroom. I squinted, trying to track him, but the world tilted. Then the bathroom door opened. Again. Julian stepped out, shirt gone, and I sobered up so fast I could have passed a sobriety test on live television. His injuries had faded to faint new scars, soft pink lines across thin skin. He looked unreal. He looked like the kind of man who never lost control because he never allowed himself to. And yet his eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them. He stopped at the foot of the bed. Not calling me 86 anymore, he asked. My mouth opened, closed, opened again. I forced myself upright, suddenly offended, to cover my own panic. I can call you whatever I want. I snapped because apparently my defense mechanism was attitude. 86 is nicer than iceberg. A slow, almost amused breath left him. Walked closer, close enough that I could smell soap and something sharper beneath it. Stress, restraint, something held tightly in check. I closed my eyes, without thinking, racing for what? For a quiche. For a lecture. For judgment. Nothing happened. I opened my eyes. Julian was looking at me with that same faint smirk that I've always felt like he knew something I didn't. He reached out and patted my head. I stared at him, speechless. Next time you want to drink, he said quietly, don't go there. I'll drink with you. I blinked. Why? His gaze flicked over my face, lingered like he was memorizing something. Then he turned and walked out to his office, leaving me on the bed, burning with confusion and a strange, aching frustration, because he could have been angry. He could have shamed me. Instead, he'd offered companionship, and my body, traitorous and soft, wanted more. I waited until I was sure he was gone. Then I reached for the drawer again, because if Julian was going to act like he didn't care, I was going to handle my own problems. I barely got the drawer open before the heat slammed through me again, fiercer, sharper, like my nerves had been waiting for this exact moment. I froze, not because of my own reaction. I froze, not because of my own reaction, but because the heat hitting me wasn't just mine. It was an echo, a loud, roaring echo coming from down the hall. It felt like a physical weight, A heavy, desperate pull that snapped the air between the bedroom and the office tight as a violin string. I snatched my hand back from the drawer like I'd touched a live wire. My breath hitched, my heart hammering a chaotic rhythm against my ribs. Thump, thump, thump. But there was a second rhythm. Thud-thud, thud-thud. Slower, heavier, darker. The office door down the hall didn't just open, it was shoved. Julian stood in the doorway of our bedroom. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket anymore. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. The sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with tension. But it was his face that stopped my lungs from working. The Ice King was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he was watching his house burn down, and had decided to stay inside. His chest heaved, his eyes, usually so clear and calm, were blown wide, the pupil swallowing the iris. "Don't," he rasped. His voice was a wrecked thing, deep and rough, like gravel over velvet. I sat paralyzed against the headboard, my hand still hovering near the nightstand. "Don't what?" I whispered, though I knew. God, I knew. He walked into the room. He didn't walk like a CEO or a gentleman. He walked like a predator that had been starving for a year. He stopped at the foot of the bed, gripping the mahogany frame until his knuckles turned white. "Don't touch it," he said, nodding toward the drawer. "You don't need that." My defiance flared, hot and sudden, shielding me from the confusion. "And why shouldn't I? You're clearly not interested, Julian. I'm a married woman living like a nun. If I want to." I felt it, he cut in. The silence that followed was louder than the storm outside had been. "What?" "I felt it," he repeated, his voice dropping an octave. "Just like I felt you in the car with 86. Just like I felt you in the hospital. Just like I feel you right now, terrified and aroused and angry." He let go of the bed frame and took a step closer. The air around us seemed to hum. The buzzing in my skin ramped up, synchronized with the flare in his eyes. "You think I'm ice, Chloe?" He let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "I have been staying away from you because every time I look at you, I feel like I'm going to lose my mind. But since that accident, the walls are down. I can't block it out anymore." He was at the side of the bed now. He loomed over me, casting a shadow that felt strangely protective. "You felt me?" I managed to ask. "I feel everything," he confessed, the admission sounding like a surrender. "When you're cold. When you're sad. And tonight? When you were thinking about touching yourself?" He leaned down, placing a hand on the mattress beside my hip. The mattress dipped. It felt like a shotgun blast to my chest. My mouth went dry. "So you came in here to stop me?" "No." His gaze dropped to my lips, then my throat, then the hem of my silk nightgown. "I came in here because if anyone is going to make you feel that way, it's going to be me." The kiss wasn't soft. It was a collision. When his lips crashed onto mine, the sensation wasn't just a spark, it was a circuit closing. The feedback loop was instantaneous. I felt his hunger, sharp, jagged, possessive, slam into my mind, mixing with my own shock until I couldn't tell where I ended and he began. He tasted like scotch and mint and suppressed longing. His hands, usually so careful, tangled into my hair, tilting my head back to deepen the angle. I made a sound, a whimper of pure relief, and I felt the satisfaction ripple through him as if it were my own. "He likes that," the thought whispered in my brain. "He needs that." "Julian." I gasped, breaking the kiss for air. "Quiet," he growled against my neck, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin there. "You've done enough talking for a year. My turn." He didn't tear my clothes off. He dismantled me. Every touch was calculated to overload the connection. When his thumb brushed my nipple through the silk, I gasped, but he shuddered. It was the strangest, most intoxicating thing I had ever experienced. The pleasure was doubled. I was feeling his reaction to my pleasure. It was an echo chamber of sensation, spiraling higher and higher until the room started to spin. "Is this?" I panted, clutching his shoulders, feeling the hard muscle beneath the cotton shirt. "Is this the accident?" "I don't care," he muttered, his hands sliding down to grip my waist, pulling me flush against him. "If this is brain damage, I never want to be cured." That night, I learned that the Ice King moniker was a lie, a protective casing. Julian wasn't cold, he was nuclear. He touched me with a reverence that bordered on worship and a hunger that bordered on madness. And the terrifying part? I could feel his emotions. I felt the insecurity, the fear that he was too boring for me, the fear that I only wanted the 86-foot types, the pretty boys. I felt his possessiveness, a dark, heavy thing that wanted to lock the doors and keep the world out. "You're not boring," I whispered into the dark hours later, as we lay tangled in sweat-dampened sheets. The connection had settled into a low, warm hum, like a purring cat. Julian stiffened slightly, his arm tightening around me. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I can feel it, Julian. The doubt. It tastes like bitter almonds." He was silent for a long time. Finally, he turned his face into my hair. "I'm a distinct contrast to the men you used to date. I run a conglomerate. I wear three-piece suits on Sundays. I don't know how to be whatever 86 was. I propped myself up on one elbow, staring down at him. The moonlight washed over his sharp features, softening the edges. 86 was a fantasy. You're real. And apparently, I traced the line of his jaw. You're a lot more dangerous than a masseur. He caught my hand, kissing the palm. I've spent a year trying not to scare you off. The arrangement. Our families. I thought you wanted the space. I thought you wanted the lifestyle, not the husband. I wanted the husband, I said softly. I just didn't know the husband was a repressed volcano. He smirked, that rare, genuine expression that made my heart flip. Volcano. I like that. For 2 weeks, we lived in a bubble. Harper called it the honeymoon phase 2.0, the sci-fi cut. I called it survival. We were learning to navigate the link. It wasn't always sexual. Sometimes I'd be in a meeting at the charity board, and a sudden wave of annoyance would hit me, sharp and gray, and I'd know Julian was dealing with his incompetent CFO. I'd text him, "Stop grinding your teeth." He'd reply, "Stop finding the graphic designer attractive." I'd blush and put my phone away. But reality has a way of piercing bubbles. It started with a dinner at the manor. His grandmother, the matriarch, sat at the head of the table like a withered queen. June was there too. Now that I knew the truth about June, her orientation, her secret love for Julian's sister, I felt a smug sort of camaraderie with her. Until the dessert course. "There are rumors," Grandma said, her spoon clinking against the fine china. The sound was like a gavel. "About a club. Desire." The temperature in the room dropped. This time it wasn't Julian. It was me. A spike of pure panic shot through my chest. Julian's hand found mine under the table. A wave of calm, forced, deliberate, flowed from him to me. It acted like a sedative. Steady, his mind seemed to say. "Rumors are just rumors, grandmother," Julian said smoothly. "Chloe and I are happy. That's all that matters." "Happiness is irrelevant to reputation," the old woman snapped. "If your wife is seen in such places, it reflects poorly on the merger. The board is jittery." I felt Julian's anger then. It wasn't hot. It was cold. Absolute zero. It was the Ice King rising up, but this time he was standing in front of me, not against me. "If the board is jittery, they can sell their shares," Julian said. His voice was quiet, terrifyingly polite. "Chloe is my wife. How we spend our time is our business. If you mention that place again, we're leaving." Silence stretched, taut and brittle. June looked up from her plate, a tiny, impressed smile playing on her lips. Grandma narrowed her eyes, assessing him, assessing us. "You've changed," she muttered. "Yes," Julian said, squeezing my hand so hard it almost hurt. I woke up. We left before coffee. In the car, the rain started again, a cruel reminder of the accident. I felt Julian's anxiety spike, a sharp needle in the base of my skull. He hated driving in the rain now. "Pull over," I said. "We're 10 minutes from home." "Julian, pull over." He guided the sleek sedan to the shoulder. The hazard lights clicked rhythmically. He gripped the steering wheel, his breathing shallow. The trauma was leaking across the bond. Flashes of white light, the sound of crunching metal, the paralyzing fear of seeing me unconscious. I unbuckled my seatbelt and leaned over the console. I placed my hands on his face. "Look at me." He turned. His eyes were haunted. "I'm here. We're safe." I pushed the feeling of safety toward him. I didn't know how to do it consciously, so I just imagined wrapping him in a heavy, warm blanket. I projected love. "I am here. I am okay." His breathing slowed. The sharp spike of fear in my head dulled, replaced by a profound, aching gratitude. "How are you doing that?" he whispered. "I don't know," I admitted. "But it works." He leaned his forehead against mine. "I love you, Chloe. I think I've loved you since the day we met, and I was too stupid to show it." "I love you too," I said. "Even if you are a telepathic freak." The crisis didn't come from the family. It came from the doctors. We went for a checkup a month later. The headaches had started, for both of us. Sharp, blinding migraines that hit at the exact same time. Dr. Aris, a specialist in neurology who looked like he hadn't slept in a decade, stared at our MRI scans. "It's rare," Aris said, tapping the screen. "Synaptic coupling. We've seen it in twins, rarely in trauma survivors who were in physical contact during a near-death event. Your neural pathways have harmonized." "Is it dangerous?" Julian asked. I felt his protectiveness unfurl like a steel shield. "The headaches are a warning," Aris said gravely. "The brain isn't designed for this level of constant empathetic feedback. It creates a loop. If one of you gets sick, the other feels the symptoms. If the stress gets too high, it could lead to seizure, aneurysms. You're overclocking each other's nervous systems." The room went silent. "What's the cure?" I asked. "Time usually. Medication to dampen neural activity, but primarily distance. You need to sever the feedback loop. Physical separation for a few weeks to let the pathways reset." I felt Julian withdraw. Physically, he didn't move. But mentally, it was like a door slamming shut. The warmth vanished. We'll do it, Julian said. No, Yerga. Julian, no. Chloe, you're in pain, he said, turning to me. I can feel it right now. Your head is pounding. Because your head is pounding. Exactly. We're hurting each other. He stood up, the old mask sliding back into place. We'll follow the protocol, doctor. The drive home was silent. He was blocking me. I could feel the wall he'd erected, a mental fortress of solitude. It was worse than before the accident. Before, I just thought he was aloof. Now, I knew he was suffering alone, and he was forcing me to do the same. He moved into the guest wing that night. The first week was agony. It was like withdrawing from a drug. I missed his presence in my mind. The house felt too big, too quiet. My head stopped hurting, but my chest ached with a phantom hollowness. I tried to stay busy. I went to lunch with Harper. So, she said, swirling her martini. You're separated? But living in the same house. It's medical, I said miserably. We were short-circuiting each other. That is the most romantic and tragic thing I've ever heard, Harper sighed. So what? You just wave at each other from across the hallway. Pretty much. He locks his door. And you're going to accept that? I stirred my salad. He's doing it to protect me. He thinks his intensity is going to kill me. Harper leaned forward. Chloe, the man drove into a tree, metaphorically speaking, and woke up with superpowers for you. Do you really think a locked door is going to stop him if you decide you don't want to be saved? She was right. Julian was making a boardroom decision about a marriage problem. He was treating our connection like a liability to be managed, not a gift to be mastered. I went home with a plan. I didn't go to the guest wing. I went to his study. I knew he was in there. I could feel the faint, dull thrum of his concentration leaking through the mental blockade. I didn't knock. I walked in. He looked up from his papers. He looked terrible. Pale, dark circles under his eyes. The separation was hurting him more than it was hurting me. Get out, he said, though his voice lacked any real bite. Chloe, please. The protocol. Screw the protocol, I said. I walked to his desk. My head feels fine. How's yours? It's fine, he lied. I knew he was lying. I could verify it. You're miserable, I said. I can feel you missing me. It feels like being underwater. He closed his eyes. If I stay close to you, I put you at risk. I won't do that. You don't get to decide that for me. I rounded the desk. You're terrified of hurting me. You've always been. That's why you were the Ice King for a year. But Julian, look at me. I grabbed his tie and spun his chair around. I'm not a piece of glass. I'm your wife. If we burn out together. I sat on his lap. His hands hovered over my waist, trembling, fighting the instinct to touch. Chloe. Reset the pathways, I whispered. Maybe the doctor is wrong. Maybe we don't need distance. Maybe we just need to build a better tolerance. I kissed him. For a second he resisted. Then the dam broke. The connection slammed back into place, but this time, it wasn't a jagged crash. It was a flood. Relief. Pure, unadulterated relief. The headache that had been threatening to form behind his eyes vanished, replaced by the endorphin rush of contact. See. I murmured against his lips. No sicher. Just us. He buried his face in my neck, inhaling sharply. I hate the guest wing, he muffled. I know. We didn't go back to the doctor. We figured it out ourselves. We learned that the headaches came when we fought the connection, when we tried to hide things. Honesty was the medication. If I was anxious, I told him. If he was stressed, he told me. The more open we were, the smoother the link became. 6 months later, we attended the annual charity gala. I wore a dress that was basically a suggestion of red silk held together by hope. Julian wore his tuxedo. We walked in arm, a power couple in every sense of the word. Harper was there, waving from the bar. June was there, actually smiling at me. Even Grandma gave a curt nod of approval. We moved through the crowd, separating to socialize but never truly disconnecting. I could feel him across the ballroom, a warm, steady anchor in the back of my mind. I was cornered by a slimy investor near the terrace. He was standing too close, his eyes dropping to my cleavage. Julian's a lucky man, he said, his voice oily. Though I've heard he can be a bit distant. I felt Julian's attention snap toward me from across the room. He hadn't heard the words, but he felt my spike of revulsion. On my way, his voice echoed in my head. Not a hallucination. Just a knowing. Julian isn't distant, I said to the investor, smiling sharply. He's very present. A hand settled on the small of my back. The investor flinched. Julian was there, appearing as if out of thin air. His face was calm, his expression polite, but I could feel the lethal warning radiating off him. Is everything all right here? Julian asked. Fine, the investor squeaked. Just complimenting your wife. Careful, Julian said softly. I'm very possessive. He steered me away toward the balcony. The night air was cool, but I was warm. You didn't have to scare him, I laughed. I didn't do anything. I just stood there. You projected predator so hard I think he wet himself. Julian chuckled, pulling me into his arms. The city lights twinkled below us. Are you happy? I tuned into him. I felt the steady beat of his heart, the fierce, unwavering love that saturated his every thought, the contentment that had finally replaced the loneliness. I'm in your head, Julian, I said. I know exactly how happy you are, and I feel the same. He kissed me, and as always, the world fell away. The spark was still there, that electric jolt from the accident, but it wasn't startling anymore. It was just the hum of us. The Ice King was dead. Long live the husband. Let's go home, he whispered against my lips. I have some new theories on game theory I want to test. I smirked, letting the hem of my dress ride up slightly against his leg. I felt his pulse jump. Is that so? Yes, he growled. Drive fast. We ran for the car, hand in hand, two hearts beating with a single, synchronized rhythm. The end.